In this video, we're going to look at addition and subtraction of integers. Now, the rules we'll go through here will apply for fractions, decimals, but the focus here on this video is going to be on integers. So I've got a number line here. Unfortunately, I don't have as many numbers as I would like to have on it, but you can see here that we have 0. And then I want to point out to you that 0 is neutral, but then the numbers on the right, that would be a positive 1, positive 2, positive 3. Those are understood. I could put pluses on these, but I don't have to. They're understood. So when you see the number 2 or the number, say, 23, I don't have to put a plus sign. It's understood to be positive. Now, if you want the number to be designated as a negative, you have to put it on there. So 0 is neutral. Then we have the positive numbers to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on forever. And then to the left, we have 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. And I want to point out that a negative number is always smaller than a positive number. 0 is greater than negative 1. Okay, the number lies to the right of that number is larger. 0 is greater than negative 1. Negative 1 is greater than negative 2. Negative 2 is greater than negative 3, and so on. So if we want to add two integers, let's just look at the pattern here. So let's suppose I start with 1, add 2. So we can go to the number line. 1 is there, and I'm adding 2. So I go 2 to the right. 1, 2. So this is equal to 3. Notice, I can start with a 2 first if I want to. So let's start with 2. Say, let's suppose I have 2 plus 1. These are positive numbers. So 2, and then I add 1 to that. So I go 1 unit to the right. If I'm adding a positive number, I go to the right. So this is still going to be 3. 5. Add 5. Okay, so I started 5 right there. And then I go 5 more to the right. So go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I go 5 units to the right of 5, I land at 10. So 5 plus 5 is 10. Now I can say that's positive 10, but it's understood. So if you're adding the positive integers, these are the positive integers right here, and then to the left of 0 are the negative integers, and of course 0 is considered a neutral, neither positive nor negative. So what happens now if I say negative 1 add negative 2? So I start at negative 1 right here. Negative 1 is right there. I'm adding negative 2. So if you're adding a negative number, you're going to move to the left. If you're adding a positive number, you're going to move to the right. So at negative 1, I move 2 units to the left because I'm adding a negative. So I go 1 over, another over, I land at negative 3. So negative 1 and negative 2 gives me a negative 3. Now notice, I can start off with negative 2 first. Instead of negative 1 plus negative 2, I'm going to write negative 2 add negative 1. So I start at negative 2. Now I'm at negative 2. I'm going to add a negative 1. So if I add a negative, I go to the left that many units. If I add a positive, I go to the right. So I'm adding a negative 1, that's 1 unit to the left, and so I go to the left 1 unit. I still land at negative 3. It's important to note then that just like with real numbers, regular numbers, if you add two integers, a plus b, a could be positive or negative, b could be positive or negative. Doesn't matter where you start in the number line. So a plus b would be the same thing as b plus a. So when you're adding positive integers, that's just regular addition of numbers, what you've been used to before anybody started talking about negative integers. So let's do this now. Suppose I have negative 1 add negative 2. So again, you can start either way, anywhere you want. You can start with the negative 1 first or the negative 2. Since I have it negative 1 plus negative 2, I'll start there first. So let's look at negative 1. We're right there. I'm going to add a -2 to that. So from there, you move 2 units. Since I'm adding a negative, I go to the left. So go 1, 2 units. Where am I at? I land at -3. So that's -3. Notice if I switch it around, I could do it this way. -2 plus -1. So this time I start at -2. That's right here. And I add 1 unit, a -1. So that means I move 1 unit to the left. So that lands at -3. So I get the same thing. So -1 add -2 is equal to -3. -2 add -1 equals to -3. Same thing. So let's do this now. Let's clear this. So notice I have positive 13 over here on the right. And over here somewhere, I don't have enough space. So I'm just going to say over here somewhere is a -13. So suppose I have 13 add -13. So again, I can start anywhere on this one. So let's suppose we start over here on the right side, the positive side. And we have 13, and then I add a -13. Adding a -13, so I'll move 13 units to the left. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I wind up at 0. So this is equal. 13 plus a -13 is going to be 0. Now, suppose I'm over here on this side, on the far left. -13 is over there. And I add a positive 13. There, far left of -13. I add a 13 positive, so I move 13 units to the right. And that's going to land at 0. It still gives me the same thing. Here, of course, I'm adding opposites. Anytime you add opposites, it's always going to be 0. 7 and -7, 0. Or -7 plus 7, 0. 11 plus -11 is 0. Or -11 plus 11 is 0. So you can see then that if you're adding positive integers, you're moving consistently to the right. The same thing happens if you're adding, say, -1. So let's suppose we have -13 or -2. -2 add -3. So think of it this way. I start with -2, and then I add -3 to that. So that moves me 3 units to the left. I'm going to land over here somewhere, and let me do it this way so you can see what's happening. I'm going to write this as a minus and then parentheses 2 plus 3. 2 add 3 gives me 5, so this is -5. Add a -2 and a -3, I get -5. Or if I switch this around, -3 add -2, same sort of thing. So you can see then that when you're adding two integers that are positive, we're moving to the right consistently. So we're going to stay in the positive direction. So it's the same thing. It's just adding the numbers and bringing the sign. A +5 add a +6. We go 5 units to the right, and then 6 more units to the right. That's going to land me at 11. So that's just regular addition of whole numbers there. Now what happens if we go the other way? -5 add -6. So again, you can start anywhere you want. Let's say you start at 0 and you have -5, so you go 5 units to the left. And then you add a -6, so you go 6 more units to the left, right? So you have 5 and 6. How many units did we move to the left from 0? 11. And where do you wind up? On the left or the right side of the number line? If it's the left side, the answer will be negative. So in this case, of course, do it this way so it'll be clear. We're moving a total of 5 plus 6 units to the left because we have a negative. So 5 and 6 is 11. And then we bring down the sign. So that's all you have to remember then. If you think of the number line, if you forget the rule, think of the number line. Adding positives, you move to the consistent to the right. If you have one positive and one negative, move both directions. So let's do this. Let's say we have a -6 plus 4. Let's start. This will be a -4, -5, and -6. So this is -6 here. And we add 4 to that. So we go to the right 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. This gives us a -2. Notice if I go the other way and say 4 plus -6. So this time I started 4, so I put it here, and then I'm adding a -6, so that's going to move me 6 units because it's negative to the left. So from 4, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I land at -2. -5, add, -3. So think of it this way. I go 5 units to the left, that's a -5, and then another 3 units to the left. Well, that's going to wind up at 8, but on the negative side. There you have it. So here's what we can do then. When you're adding two numbers with the same sign, carry the sign. So I'm going to put it here. The sign is the same, just add the numbers. 5 plus 3. So here's your rule again. If you're adding two numbers with the same sign, carry the sign with you. Okay, so in this case, I put it outside the parentheses, you can see, and you add the numbers. So just know the sign for now. What are the numbers? They're the same. The sign is the same, so you add them. 5 and 3 is 8. And you bring down the sign. If this had been +5 and a +3, or just 5 plus 3, then you do the same thing, 5 plus 3, but then the sign would be plus. And if it's a plus, you don't have to put it there. It's understood. So let's review some of these. -8, add -4. We're adding two numbers with the same sign, a negative and a negative. So bring down the sign. It's negative, okay? Bring it down. And add the numbers 8 and 4, 12. And you can create a larger number line to keep track of these, but those are the rules. If you're adding two numbers. Now, they're positive, it's going to be easy. If you're adding an 8 plus a +4, 8 and 4, or 12. But if it's negative, again, you just add 8 and 4 is 12, and bring down the sign. 100. 100 is way over here somewhere on the right of the number line. Add -100. It's on the opposite side. It's on the negative side. But you can see that I go 100 one way and then 100 back. I land at 0. It's equal to 0. I can put the -100 first and then add 100. It's still going to come out the same. So those are the rules for addition. If you're adding two numbers that have the same sign, just add them and bring down the sign. So if you're adding two negatives, add the numbers, bring down the sign. Now, if the signs are opposite, let's say you have a 10, add -3. If the signs are opposite, so here we go, 10 to the right and 3 to the left. So we're taking 3 away from the 10. We're still going to wind up on the positive side because we went more units to the right. So in this case, we can say if the signs, one positive, one negative, they're opposite, then just ignore the sign for now and say, okay, 10, and subtract the numbers. Smaller from the larger. So 10 subtract 3 will give me 7. And then take the sign of the one that was larger, disregarding the sign. Because remember, -3 is less than 10. So in this case, the larger number is positive. So this comes out to +7. Now let's do it this way. Let's take -10, add 3. So now we go 10 units to the left and then 3 to the right. Or we can say, if you start off with a 3, we go 3 to the right of 0 and then 10 back. Where does that wind up at? It's going to wind up at 7. But because the larger number, disregarding the sign, is the 10, and it's going to be on the negative side, this is still going to come out negative. So see, notice here it's positive because of the 10 was positive. So the rule is, again, if you're adding numbers with different signs, one positive, one negative, you're going to go in opposite directions, so you'll be subtracting. So just subtract the smaller from the larger, and then take the sign of the larger. In this case, disregarding the sign, 10 is larger, has a positive, so this one comes out positive. Over here on this one, negative 10 and 3, they're different signs, so we subtract 3 from 10, we get 7. But in this case, the number disregarding the sign that's larger is 10, it has a negative, so the answer comes out to a negative. Now those are the rules for addition. For subtraction, just remember this. If you have A, subtract B. So here we're saying that A and B are one of these numbers. These are integers. A subtract B. If you have A subtract B, that's the same thing as A add the opposite of B. And then once you have this set up, you can solve it using the rules we just went over, or use the number line. So in other words, this is telling me this. If I have, first let's work with something like this, 7 subtract 5. Now that's just regular subtraction, so that one you shouldn't have any problems. It's just 7 subtract 5 is what? 2, right? But if we can still write it this way, and notice we're going to get the same answer, I can write it as 7. What does it say? A subtract B is the same thing as A add the opposite. So let's say 7 add the opposite of 5. And the opposite of 5 is a negative. So without using the rule, the regular rule here, you can just say 7 subtract 5 without using this rule. 7 subtract 5 is 2. But now if I rewrite it using this little rule here, then now I just follow the regular rules. I'm adding numbers with different signs, 7 and a negative 5. So I subtract, I'm just adding two numbers with different signs, subtract. So 7 subtract 5 is 2. And then the number with the larger number is 7. And it has a positive, so the answer is positive 2. Now let's look at one like this. Minus 8. Subtract a negative 2. So again, when you're just doing regular addition of signed numbers or integers, if the numbers have the same sign, both positive or both negative, just disregard the sign and add the numbers. And then whatever the sign is, you bring it along. If they're both negative, the answer is going to be negative. If they're both positive, the answer is going to be positive. And it's just regular addition. When you're adding two numbers with different signs, then ignore the sign and then just subtract the numbers if they're different. One positive, one negative. Just disregard the sign, subtract them, and then take the sign of the one that is larger in absolute value. In other words, disregarding the sign, which one is larger. So of these two right here, negative 8 and negative 2, they're negative, okay? Negative 2 is actually larger than negative 8 because negative 8 is further to the left. But if I disregard the sign, 8 is larger. But anyway, the rule here is I have negative 8 subtract negative 2. It tells me subtraction is adding the opposite. So you change this minus here to a plus. And the opposite of negative 2 is a positive 2. So the rule then is really, you have subtraction, change it to addition, and follow the rules of addition. So now here, negative 8 and 2 gives me what? So now you follow the rules for addition. We said if the signs are different, and they are negative 8 and a positive 2, ignore the sign and subtract the numbers. So 8 subtract 2 is 6. And then take the sign of the larger one, which is the 8. Has a negative. So we have a negative. There we have it. Let's see, clear this. Let's try this one. 8 subtract a negative 5. Okay, this is a subtraction problem. But to make it easier, you can just make it into an addition and say, okay, when you're subtracting, in this case 8 subtract negative 5, make it an addition and take the opposite of the number you're subtracting. So the opposite of a negative is a positive, so negative 5 becomes positive 5. So now I got 8 plus 5. Now that's just regular addition of integers or whole numbers if you want. So 8 and 5 is 13. Now we don't put the sign But remember, that's understood to be a positive 13. Now let's look at this one. Negative 10 subtract a negative 7. Know your rules for addition. And then when you have a subtraction, just convert it into an addition. So negative 10 subtract a negative 7. This becomes a negative 10. Change it to addition. So this becomes add. And then take the opposite of the number you're subtracting. We're subtracting negative 7. That becomes a plus 7. Now you just follow the rules for addition. We're adding two numbers with different signs. One's negative, one positive. So we ignore the sign and just subtract 10. Forget about the sign for now. 10 subtract 7 is 3. And then which one is the larger without the sign? It's the 10, and it has a negative. So the answer is a negative 3. And then the only other thing I wanted to point out for this video here, if you have several numbers to add, say you have this, negative 2, add 5, subtract 2, add negative 1, subtract the negative 3. Let's just rewrite it. Let's rewrite everything as an addition. So negative 2, add 5. This one we leave it, it's addition. Here's a subtraction. We could just see, this one's pretty straightforward. 5 subtract 2, it's just 3. But let's just leave it for now so we can follow the rules. So let's write this as a plus a negative 2. And then we leave this one, it's already addition, negative 1. And then here we have a subtraction. Again, the rule is if you're subtracting, change it to addition, and the opposite of what you're subtracting. So we're subtracting a negative 3, make that a 3. So negative 2, add 5, subtract 2, I wrote it as add negative 2, and then add negative 1, already addition, and then this subtraction, change it to addition, and then take the opposite of the number you're subtracting. And then you just work it 2 at a time. Let's just do it this way. Let's take these two first. Negative 2 and 5. The signs are different, so we subtract. So 2 from 5 is 3. And then the 5 is a larger number without disregarding sign, so we take the positive. Okay, and then let's do these two here. So negative 2 add negative 1. Both signs are the same, so we just add them. 2 and 1 is negative 3, and we bring down the sign. And then we add 3. Okay, so let's go back and say, so I'm doing negative 2 and 5. Signs are different, so I subtract the 2 from the 5. Take the sign of the larger number, which is 5, so that stays positive. Then here, these two here, they're both negatives. So the rule is, if the signs are the same, just add them, bring down the sign. So 2 and 1 is negative is 3, and then bring down the sign, it's the negative 3. And then this one, just put it on 3. So 3 and negative 3, those cancel to 0. So what do I have left? I have left so those are basically the rules for adding or subtracting integers. And basically when you get into fractions or decimals, the rules are not going to change. You're basically going to follow these same rules. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.